and welcome to the Football for Kids podcast with me, Darren Rees. It's time for another episode of Football Jobs, where you, the listeners of the podcast, get to interview somebody who works in the sport of football. Last time, it was legendary broadcaster John Murray. This time round, it's the brilliant writer and journalist Henry Winter. Henry has been working in football for well over 3 decades. He's met the greatest players in the world. He's been in the stands for some of the greatest games of the last 30 years or more. And he is extremely knowledgeable and passionate about the sport. Thank you so much to every single one of you who took the time out to think of and send a question in at such short notice. Over 100 questions came in, and I had to pick 10 of them for this episode. If your question wasn't used this time round, don't you worry. All the questions were fantastic, and there will be more episodes for you to get involved in the not so distant future. So, let's get straight to business and listen to the interview with Henry Winter. Well, Henry, thank you so much for joining me on the Football for Kids podcast. The kids have got some fantastic questions for you. Before we get into their questions, I've got a few of my own. And my first one is, what exactly is a football writer and what makes a good one?
What is a football writer? I can tell you what a football writer is. I don't know whether I can tell you what a good one is. A football writer, there are 4 elements to the job: match reporting, going to games and reporting on them, interviewing players and managers and interesting people in the game to gain more insight yourself and obviously to pass that on to people who want to read about it. Columns, writing effectively. Views on the game, so whether it's Marcus Rashford on school meals, whether it's Raheem Sterling on racism, whether it's Jordan Henderson going over to Saudi, whether it's players overplaying, Phil Foden maybe playing 65 games this year, issues like that. And then the fourth element is news reporting, so any news story that you get about football you print. What makes a good one? Trust. Most important things, like anything in life. It's very easy to lose trust, and it takes a while to build it up. So that's absolutely key. Don't let people down. And then an obvious thing, whatever walk of life you're involved in, is work ethic. It's absolutely key. You know, the people I know who are at the top of this profession are those who work hardest. There are no shortcuts. And then I think another element, particularly for journalists, and they probably are inherently anyway, is curiosity. I think if you're curious about games, you're curious about travel, curious about countries you go to, curious about meeting people within football and interviewing them. So if I go and interview, I've done about 1,500 interviews over the past few years, and it's all about research. So you go in and you interview, Rashford, or you go and interview Rooney, or the modern generation, Rashford's modern generation, but a sort of Declan Rice or Bukayo Saka. You should be curious about them as individuals and as about footballers, but also back that up, and here comes the work ethic again, by doing so much research. Almost, when I went to see a player the other day and I knew the name of his cats, and he was going, "How on earth did you know that?" I was like, I'm interested, I'm curious, and I've done my research. And that they then respond because they know you've done your work.
Okay, my next one is, what is the best thing about your job?
Travel. I just being sent to different parts of the world. I'll be heading to America, Mexico, Canada with my 10th World Cup, and Italy, my first one, just seems like yesterday. And just traveling around Italy, even though I was very much on a budget and sleeping on park benches and traveling by trains and overnights and everything, it was just that opportunity, again, it's that curiosity, just to go to the places, to go to Japan and see the people there. And I always get up early and go for a run, because then you see a country when it's, robbing the sleep from its eyes, and you get the best feel of it. Travel.
It must be amazing being able to travel the world, meet different people all around the planet while doing something which you love. Now, the last one from me before we get into the kids' questions is, how did you get into football writing?
I've always wanted to write about football because I like the idea of, being passionate about football, as so many people are, and also the desire to travel. So it was just a question of, I knew that halfway through school, and then university was all about, I played non-league at university and edited sports editor of the student newspaper. And then the day after my final exam, I just went down to London, where I thought that the streets were paved with ink and I could get in, and just knocked on doors and just tried to persuade me. It's different now because anyone who wants to get into the game, into the industry, can just write a blog, create a vlog, podcast, and post it on social media, which is brilliant. So I can judge within about 30 seconds if someone's going to be good, just by looking at their material.
Well, thank you very much, Henry. That's all from me. Let's get into the kids' questions. And the first one is from Ryan Wade.
Hi Darren and Henry, my name is Ryan and I play for the Linton Town Football Club. Please can you give a shout out to them? I play as a goalkeeper, so please can you do an episode on Wes Fotheringham and Dean Henderson? My question for Henry is, what is the most dramatic match he has ever written about? Thank you.
Well, Ryan, a massive shout out to you and your team and everyone who you play football with, including your coaches, who I'm sure do a fantastic job. What about that for a question then, Henry? What is the most dramatic match you have ever written about?
Well, it's a really good question, Ryan. And I probably, over the last 30, 35 years, probably covered about 5,000 games. Two that stick out: Istanbul 2005, Liverpool's amazing comeback. I was in the Ali Sami Yen, the stadium, at half-time, just writing all about AC Milan thumping Liverpool. And this Liverpool fan just popped up beside me. He had a photographer's bib on, God knows how he got it. And he said, no, don't write us off yet, don't write us off yet. And of course, the rest is history, 3-3, extra time, shootout dramas. And then before that, Manchester United in the Nou Camp in Barcelona, where I had actually filed and the print site was about to roll on it. We were just about to press send on Bayern Munich beating Manchester United 1-0, and I'd written sort of like 1,000 acerbic words about Manchester United's performance. And then, of course, the whole thing was turned around. So I actually filed a piece on 1-0 to Bayern, 1-1 game going into extra time, and then, 40 seconds later, Solskjaer, 2-1 Manchester United glory. So, that was a busy night.
The next one is from Dylan in Ireland.
Hi Henry, my name is Dylan. I'm 7 from Waterford, Ireland. My question is, who is the most famous player you've met and what were they like?
Well, Dylan, as you're from Ireland, I don't know if you're north or south, but I know he was a legend on both sides of the border. George Best was an absolute joy, just a lovely, shy man, amazing footballer, obviously, an absolute legend for Northern Ireland and Manchester United. Pele, the great Pele, I interviewed him a couple of times around the world. He was absolutely brilliant. He was just such a character, smiling. And if you'd arranged to meet Pele, like in a hotel, a quiet room, in a quiet hotel, in a quiet city, in a quiet country, when there's no tournament on, you think, right, I can have a good 10, 12 minutes with the great man, really pick his brains, no one around. Within about 5-10 seconds, 3 or 4 people are coming to the room to listen, and then more and more and more. And it was just like a sort of wave of people, because Pele, just everyone wants to be around Pele. Of the more modern generation, Marcus Rashford is always a very interesting interview. Probably Declan Rice is the most fun as an interviewee, because he's just such a likable individual. I remember I was interviewing Jack Wilshere once when he was leaving West Ham. He couldn't do the interview in the pavilion at West Ham, so he did it in his car, and we were doing a Zoom, and it was a hot day, and Jack had actually left his window open, And the interview was going fine, and then suddenly Jack got knocked off balance because Declan Rice literally threw himself through the window. I said, "Oh, what's going on? Who are you talking to?" "You're talking to Henry Winter. What are you trying to do? You're trying to leave the club." And he's just such a character. He just enjoys life. You can see why Arsenal have been sort of uplifted. So Dylan, I'd probably say of the modern generation, I mean, Declan, there's no way he would see himself as famous. He would just see himself as a normal guy who just loves playing football, and he's very down to earth, and he is. But certainly he's absolutely brilliant fun, so I'd probably say him.
Next up, it's Samuel in Surrey.
Hello there, Henry Winter. I'm Samuel. I live in Hersham in Surrey. I play for Molesey Juniors under-9s Cobras. I have a question for you. What's the most enjoyable match you've seen? And who do you think was the best player in that match? Thanks for your time. Ta-ta.
Well, I've got to say, Samuel, a very good voice note, and the ta-ta at the end was stupendous. A big shout out to you and to everybody that you know and play football with, and a great question too. So what's the answer, Henry?
I mean, Samuel, I'm going to have to go for Michael Owen's hat-trick in the 5-1 in Munich. In 2001. I mean, it was very significant on many levels because it allowed England to sort of regain the initiative in qualifying for the Japanese and South Korean World Cup. So it was a huge moment, but also the Germans hadn't been beaten in their backyard. Munich was a stronghold. So when they went 1-0 up, you thought, "Oh, this is following a familiar theme." And then Owen was fantastic. Gerrard, Heskey, 3 Liverpool players, they were outstanding. And from a personal perspective, mine is that I'd spent a term at school in Munich and gone to that stadium, the old Olympic Stadium pre the Allianz, and watched a few games there. And so it was just lovely sitting there and just seeing the Germans getting beaten like that.
I remember Michael Owen scoring that hat-trick, and I remember that match very well. We haven't done an episode on Michael Owen yet, but possibly we could do one, and one on some other England legends on the build-up to the Euros, which I am extremely excited about. The next question is a written question, and it's from Jessica in Aberdeen. Jessica says, if you were not a football writer, what do you think you would have been?
Hi, Jessica. Well, I used to live in Scotland, so anything up in Scotland would have been nice because it's such a great country. Probably a copywriter in advertising. I did look briefly at that because I thought football writing was going to be competitive to get into. So I thought, well, I need something else which involved writing. I'm quite good at writing headlines and stupid things with puns and plays on words. So I thought maybe a copywriter. But fortunately, so far, I mean, I might have to go back to it. But fortunately, the football writing has taken off.
Now, the next question is from my son, Charlie. And Charlie says, have you ever had any catastrophes, like forgotten your questions in an interview, spilt hot chocolate over your equipment, or anything like that?
Charlie, you obviously been watching your dad's career. Is there's some element of that? Look, we've all been through it. I mean, probably my worst one was when Ashley Cole was playing at Arsenal and he was just breaking through and he was doing fantastic. He was England's best left back for a decade, fantastic player. But he very rarely gave interviews, and Arsenal allowed me to sort of sit down and I spent about 20 minutes with him, and I came out thinking that's absolutely brilliant. And then I realised I hadn't pressed record on my tape. And I quickly thought, how much of this can I remember? And it was just a car crash. So after then, I've always taken 2 tapes in, and it looks a bit paranoid, but absolutely important. There was another one during lockdown when we did a lot of interviews over Zooms, and I was interviewing, I think it was Jordan Ayew, and I had my tape recorder on, and then because the sound quality wasn't so good, I put headphones on, which meant, of course, that his voice wasn't coming out of the computer, which was just spectacularly thick of me. And then I realised about 5 minutes from the end, and then I rang him up afterwards and explained, and he was utterly charming. And he said, "No problem, we'll do it again," even though I made an absolute idiot of myself. And probably the third one was a Manchester United the game when I'm never late for games, because A, I love going there and talking to people, but B, you get there early just to sort of beat the traffic. And but I was late once. I got held up on the road, and fortunately Manchester United stewards knew me and they allowed me to park, very, very close to the entrance. And as I was sort of running to the press entrance, I heard a huge roar. This was about 3 minutes in, and Andy Cole had scored, as I discovered when I got inside. And so the only way I could actually sort of honestly cover it was to say there was such a roar inside Old Trafford that it could be heard outside, which at least covered myself. So, yeah, I mean, I've made so many mistakes, but those are probably three that I cling to most.
The next question is from Jessie, age 6, in Brighton.
Hi, I'm Jessie, age 6 from Brighton, and my question is, what's the best football match you've ever been to?
Great question, Jessie, and very well read too. What's the answer then, Henry?
I mean, England, really. I mean, England's, I probably write as much with heart as well as head. I mean, England have been playing games since 1872, and I've covered about a third of their games. Where they've done about 1,100 games England have played, and I've done about a third of them. But that's really a reflection on how many games there've been recently. I would go back to Euro '96 and the game against Scotland. Actually, probably the game against the Netherlands, the 4-1, which was just amazing. 2 goals from Sheringham, 2 goals from Shearer. When the sun came out and Wembley was singing "Football's Coming Home," there was an amazing atmosphere. And just those two, and you thought, wow, England could win this tournament. The years of hurt could end. Of course, it all went the wrong way during the semi-final and penalties. But, that moment, the earth stopped and you thought, wow, England own it.
Wow, a special moment for you, Henry, and I guess a memory that will live with you forever. And I'm sure that our listeners will experience some of those when it comes to football in the future. Now, my next question is a written one, and it's from Adam in Bristol. And Adam says, have any managers or footballers ever been horrible to you? And if they have been, what did you do about it?
Yeah, good question, Adam. I mean, probably a bit of a list. And, I'm one of the sort of more mild-mannered journalists, and the people I've worked for tend not to put sort of too daft headlines on sort of my stories. So, Roy Keane, when he was manager of Ipswich, I asked him a question and he absolutely went for me. And there's a slight, you know who your friends are, because normally the other journalists would sort of back you up. But I looked around in the press room at Portman Road, and all the other guys were sort of taking a step back, not wanting to be caught up in Keane's sort of machine gunning of what was left of me. Sir Alex Ferguson, I asked him probably a bit naive question. It was a sort of comparison with Liverpool, which was never going to go down well with the Manchester United legend. And I got a brief blast of the hairdryer. One journalist really irritated me. I get on with all the journalists because they're, we've all got football in common. We're all passionate about it. And but one, when I was starting out, he absolutely blanked me. And normally everyone's incredibly welcoming. I mean, you know yourself, Darren. People are very welcoming in this industry. And so I thought, well, I'm going to get him back one day. And I did, in a very, very unprofessional way. If I can talk, well, we'll talk about it. I went, this is so unprofessional, I went and signed for one of his tickets at a game and gave it to another journalist who I was friendly with, and so he couldn't get in and she could, and so now the world knows.
Okay, the next one is from Baxter.
Hi, my name is Baxter and I play for Litchfield Rangers. I would like to know which football player you've been most impressed with when you met them and why.
I mean, Bukayo Saka at Arsenal and with England as well, one of the occasions I've spoken to him has been an absolute joy. And I always thought he was sort of quite quiet, quite respectful, very well brought up, very intelligent. And then I sort of spoke to him, and he was just absolutely charming, just a genuinely likeable guy. And I spoke to a couple of the Football Association staff afterwards, and it was just after Bukayo Saka had been called up for the first time by Southgate. And they said that Saka, when he reported for duty at St George's Park, he actually spent what little free time he had, just going around the different departments. So he would sit in the media department and say, how does your job work? He would sit in with the kit man, obviously know how that worked, but just to sort of get to know people. So I just thought it was a very sort of grounded individual. Absolutely, I have Bukayo Saka. I had to tell him to keep quiet once, actually, which was not his fault, but I was interviewing Zinchenko, and Bukayo Saka came past, and he was basically, it was an Arsenal community event, and he had about 30 kids just sort of bouncing around him, just delighted to be close to Bukayo Saka. And I looked around the corner and said, guys, keep the noise down. I was vaguely polite, and then I realised Bukayo was in the middle of them, so I sort of waved a half an apology, and he was absolutely fine about it. But and he did keep the noise down. And he actually led the kids away, and I just thought that was a really classy, professional thing to do, because he knew I was interviewing Zinchenko. So, a lot of credit to him.
Bukayo Saka, what a player and what a lad. That's so great to hear. The penultimate question from the Football for Kids listeners is from Archie.
Hi Darren, I'm Archie. I have a younger brother called Teddy, and I play for Wollongong City Whirlwinds under 9s. My question is, who is the funniest football player Henry has ever interviewed? Thank you. Bye. Soon.
Archie, I don't know who your club is, but James Maddison's good value. Whenever you talk to him, even if he's not playing particularly well, he's just fun. But I would say number one over the last couple of years, along with Declan Rice, is Jack Grealish. Jack Grealish has not changed one bit from the kid who burst through at Aston Villa. I think he likes to be loved, but then he gives so much love to... You see it when he walks into the ground. He is just a genuinely pretty emotional, likeable individual, so warm. He'll stop and talk to people. He'll have a chat. I remember doing a Zoom once with him, again during lockdown. And at the end of it, there's that little bit at the end when you sort of, you're about to sort of log out the system. He said to the person he was with, he said, I hope that was all right. And I just thought that was a really nice sort of respectful thing, and just show, how well he was brought up. But what a nice guy. And I find generally in this business is that the higher a player rises, actually sometimes the nicer they are, because they don't feel like they've got to trample on other people to make themselves look better. They're just, he's £100 million player. He's playing for England. He did the treble last season. He played a very important part in that. And Grealish is just a genuinely likeable individual. Very, very funny. The conversations we've had with him on the record, off the record. And he cares. He cares about City just like he cared about Aston Villa, still cares about Aston Villa, and he desperately cares about England and wants to do well. So, I'll put Jack Grealish as my number one.
And the final question from the Football for Kids listeners is from Lily, who is a Bromley fan and is 11 years old. And Lily says, if you could go back and watch one football match once more, what match would it be and why?
Thanks, Lily. Great question, and congratulations to Bromley. It have to be the 1966 World Cup final, because of what it means to England, what it means to English football, the legends who played in it. I've interviewed, I've interviewed all of them down the years. Sadly, they're all passing away. Just absolute legends, and all, again, that theme of people who get to the very top are actually some of the nicest. Jeff Hurst is just such a likeable guy. You can go and have a cup of tea with him and just a chat with him, and he must get asked the same question all the time. Was the ball over the line? What's it like to have scored the hat-trick? Where's the ball? And Bobby Moore, sadly one of the first to pass away. Again, the grace of Bobby Moore, the captain. So for me, they are England's greatest ever sporting team, let alone football team. So to have actually been there, and it's one of those famous events where it sounds like about 300,000-400,000 people were there, when Wembley can actually only take about 100,000 at the time, because everyone wanted to be associated with that. So England's greatest moment, 4-2, what a game. And Lily, great question. I would love to go back to that.
Well, that's all the kids' questions for this time round, and they were all absolutely fantastic, so you should all be very proud of yourselves. Before we finish this episode, a couple from me, Henry. What would your advice be for the younger generation listening who may want to work in football as a football journalist and experience some of the amazing things that you have?
Write every day, and don't feel that it has to be a great sort of like academic piece of work. Just make it fun. Play with the English language. I mean, a lot of the work that you're going to be doing is going to be, you're just going to be talking into podcasts or doing content. So it's not always going to be writing. So just do that every day. And even if it's just a sort of voice note to yourself of about sort of 90 seconds, you've just watched a match, you've just watched Jadon Sancho qualify for the Champions League, just get your phone out and just do a sort of, I don't know, even a 40-second voice note on it. And even, you know, send it to a friend or just sort of keep it for yourself and just keep doing things like that. You know, keep writing, keep sort of just little sort of blogs, even if it's a diary. And one other thing, just listen. Listening is just so important, because if you listen, you learn. If you listen, you'll be a good interviewer. If you listen, you'll pick up news stories. You know, if you listen in matches, you'll hear what the fans are saying, other people are saying. And so just absorb, you know, we're sponges, absorb all that information. But most importantly, just have fun, because it's just such a brilliant profession to get into. I mean, I feel like I'm still sort of, you know, making my way in it. I've been doing it for 30 odd years. And it is, you're writing about something you're passionate about and that so many people want to read about. So, but yeah, go out there and when you write, or when you're blogging, or when you're doing podcasts, content, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, do it with a smile.
And the last question for me, and it's a bit of a difficult one, is who do you think will win the Euros and why?
Oh, I would love it if it was England. I mean, England, their front six, when you look at Bellingham's world class, Harry Kane's world class, Phil Foden's world class. So, you know, three of the front six, Declan Rice arguably is. So England have got that. I mean, Saka as well on the right. Maybe Rashford starts on the left, but Anthony Gordon's playing well. So, you know, there's so many options in that front six. I worry about centre half. I worry about left back if Luke Shaw's not fit. But look, John Stones, he's regaining his sharpness, right-sided centre-half, definitely. Kyle Walker, probably the best right-back in the world at the moment. Goalkeeper Jordan Pickford, I mean, he's never let England down. He'll probably take a penalty. I still think it'll be France. I just think they've got two players in every position. They've got a manager who makes the key changes in the key games. I think Portugal absolutely will have a chance there. They're flying. They've got some fantastic players. And Germany, you look at the sort of, you know, the Germans marching on Wembley, you know, with Borussia Dortmund last night, and the players that they've got coming through. So, but I think France, but England have got the players to win it, definitely.
Well, thank you once again to Henry Winter, one of the top football journalists and authors out there. I hope that you thoroughly enjoyed listening and learning in that episode with Henry, and I hope that conversation has inspired you for whatever it is you want to do in the future. Who knows, in years to come, you could be covering World Cups, travelling the world, and sitting down with the likes of Kylian Mbappe for a chat. So remember, if you know someone who loves football just as much as you do, then please tell them about Football for Kids. And whether you're playing football soon, watching it on the telly, or pitchside, I hope that you enjoy the game. See you next time.